Well, thanks again, Ray Otis. As the road trip kicks off, 2 periods of play complete of the Hurricanes and the Capitals. And in our second intermission, as always, it's time for you to take center stage with your lucid questions here in Kaiton's Corner. Just send your question along if you want to participate, if you're a new fan or a veteran fan, to Chuck K. That's Chuck and the letter K at CarolinaHurricanes.com. Give us your full name, where you're emailing from, and any good question about hockey that you have in your mind, and we'll answer it here on the air in future second intermissions. That's Chuck and the letter K at CarolinaHurricanes.com, or go to the Hurricane website at CarolinaHurricanes.com and submit your question that way by clicking on the Kaiton's Corner icon and going through the proper procedures to submit your question in that matter. As Tim Peterson from Cary, North Carolina did, he says, I'm wondering how you think the team compares to 10 years ago and some of the improvements that we've made and some of the establishments of the style of play and such. Tim, good question. I know we're going to probably get a lot of questions in this 10th anniversary season about the Hurricanes past and present, and when the Hurricanes landed from Hartford back in the summer of 1997, they came in with a cadre of players that I thought was very respectable for the time. And I thought that people like Keith Primo, who was the captain of the club, from Sammy Kapanen and Gary Roberts, who actually came on the scene in August in a very daring trade that general manager Jim Rutherford engineered with the Calgary Flames. Roberts' career, as you remember, was called dead when he had the debilitating neck injury. He missed a year of hockey. But Rutherford was very confident, and of course the revisionist history has shown that Gary Roberts certainly was not finished as a National Hockey League player. Came in, contributed very well. In fact, that particular season scored 20 goals for the Hurricanes, one of 4 20-goal scorers they had that year, including Primo Kapanen and Nellie Emerson, who was that little slippery forward. Jeff O'Neill that year almost scored 20 goals. So when you looked at the forwards, it really was confounding, because there were some people that could put the puck in the net, but they just didn't have that goal-scoring proclivity that we see today with the Arsenal. So I guess if I would compare and contrast the forwards primarily, obviously today's Hurricane team with people like Williams and Stahl and Stillman and Cole and Brindamore, Whitney, you just go right down the list of guys that are very prolific goal scorers. There's no comparison. I think this team 10 years later is got a lot more firepower. There's one constant on the defense, and it's number 2, Glenn Wesley, who that year had a tough season. He only basically in that season, well, he played all 82 games, but every time, even some of the new fans would say, geez, Glenn, are you an offensive defenseman? Are you a defensive defenseman? And people are always expecting, in his days in Boston when he was drafted in the first round, they were expecting a little bit more of an offensive guy. He was kind of in the shadows of Ray Bourque and never could get to that stage. But boy, what a reliable defensive defenseman and a reliable penalty killer, and just tremendous stay-at-home positioning. Glenn Wesley's been a constant. After that, on defense, you had Jeff Brown, Curtis Lasician, you remember Adam Burt from that first season, and Sean Hill, who was acquired from the Ottawa Senators, actually played half the season for Chris Murray, and obviously he was an anchor man, and they even gave Nolan Pratt, a 22-year-old youngster at that time and a draft pick, an opportunity to play on the defense. Kevin Holler also played 65 games with the Hurricanes that year on the defense, and right now, as I would compare them, remember now, in those days, the game was a little bit different. There was that the trapping style. Paul Maurice was a very defensive-oriented coach vis-a-vis Peter Laviolette, who was more attack-oriented. And I think today most coaches are attack-oriented because wanting to draw penalties and the games being called tighter today than they were 10 years ago affords you to be more aggressive. So even Paul Maurice has probably changed that tact in Toronto. You looked at the Hurricane defense, they were very, very solid defensively back 10 years ago, and I think that even today they're similar. When you look at people like Commodore and Gleason, Gleason's like a Curtis Lasician type in my estimation. Commodore, a big defenseman that has some offensive skills. There's a lot of comparisons. I think the defense is about the same. It's improved, I think, from the standpoint of individual personnel, but I think stylistically the Hurricane defense really hasn't changed very much vis-a-vis 10 years ago, Tim. So, and in the nets, Obviously, when you looked at the Calgary Flames and the deal that was made by Jim Rutherford, do you know that no fewer than 5 goaltenders were used in the 97-98 season by the Carolina Hurricanes, including Trevor Kidd, who played the lion's share of the games, as it turned out, after he was traded from Calgary. Sean Burke, who was later traded to Vancouver, had played 25 games. He came in as the number 1 goaltender that year. And then you had cameo appearances from Pat Jablonski, Kirk McLean, and Mike Fountain there. And you know, one thing that's real interesting is that 4 of those 5 goaltenders played in the Vancouver organization at one time or another. So, but today it's in good hands with Cam Ward. I think you would agree, and John Graham, a capable backup netminder, and stability has been the key 10 years later in the Hurricanes' nets, thanks to the drafting of Cam Ward, who, by the way, is the first goaltender in franchise history to play more than 60 games in any particular season, and that's saying something, over 29 NHL years for this franchise. So, Tim Peterson, thanks for your question about the comparisons and contrasts of the Hurricanes vis-a-vis 10 years ago here in Kaiton's Corner. Remember, we'll do it again on Tuesday night when the Canes meet the Leafs in Toronto. Just send your question along to chuckk@carolinahurricanes.com. Make it a good one, and provide us with your full name and where you're emailing from, and we'll answer your question on a future second intermission here in Kaiton's Corner. I'm Chuck Kaiton.